Well, we'll have to move on to the next category topic here, and this will be Dean Goldschmidt discussing the role of industry and how it should fund research and it be associated with medical societies. And I'll just give a little introduction as we've worked with the Senator Grassley and Senator Cole's Box's Finance Committee quite a bit over the last several years for a variety of oversight hearings, and Senator Grassley got through in the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, the Physician Sunshine Act. It's having an impact on the meetings this year. ASCO, everyone's complaining that they can't even get a pen, or if you get a free coffee, you have to sign up. So some people think the pendulum has swung too far the other way. Where do we stand now? What are your thoughts? What role should industry have?
You know, let me start by saying the obvious, which is the fact that you know, in the history of medicine in the industrial era, there are no device company, there are no pharmaceutical company that can develop a good device or a good drug or any therapeutics for that matter without the input of physician and care providers. Now, it needs to happen, and I think that Senator Grassley is right and on the right track. It needs to happen with vis-a-vis the interaction of these two groupings with the highest ethics standards that we can possibly achieve. I think that disclosure, management of conflicts when they arise is extremely important, and you know, at our university we are quite proud of the fact that we are within the cutting edge group of medical schools that not only discloses all out of university activities, including of course activities that we have in the context of collaboration with industry. But we this year will even include the compensation associated with these activities, such that anybody who want to find out, who Dr. Goldschmidt or Dr. Sacco has interaction with in industry can search that website and find out what these relationships are and how much we get compensated for it. I think that that's a very important step in going in that highest ethics standards for what we do, but it also bring the opportunity to better identify the issues of conflict and manage them appropriately. But remember that if you completely eliminate the opportunity for industry to interact with physicians, whether they are in the academic world or not, you will hurt patients, because it will prevent us to advance the technologies. There are a lot of chronic disease processes like cancers, diabetes, etc., that need to advance in terms of scientific progress, in terms of development of new therapeutics in such a way that we can manage our patients more effectively. I always tell my colleagues and students, if I was to treat a patient with a heart attack today, the way I used to be told to do so when I was on other therapeutics, including the aspirin and beta blockers and statins, etc. So we cannot discontinue the progress of our field simply because we are afraid of interacting with industry. As long as this interaction happens in the optimal ethics standards, there's absolutely no reason to discontinue that interaction. And I think that, a positive impact of the effort of Grassley and the Finance Committee is to try to identify situations, particularly those that involve public funding, such as NIH funding, where there is a problem relative to conflict of interest, and try to encourage and push organizations to reach a higher level of regulations and rules. I think that's a good thing.
How do we interviewed the authors of the Institute of Medicine report that made recommendations of how industry should work with societies, and they made some things which we won't go over here. But how can we avoid, on one hand, the bad, egregious examples of the multi-million-dollar vacation houses to orthopedic surgeons versus having industry-supported good trials? How do we do that?
Well, I think it's by encouraging organizations to adopt what we call a responsible conduct. I think that in order to maintain the trust of the public, it is really very important for organizations to adopt rules that are responsible conduct, and that includes societies. The society that obviously promotes a particular industry because that industry is sponsoring the kind of setting that you describe. Obviously, there will be a bias, and that could influence the decision-making process. So that should be managed by the society that is responsible for that. And if it does not happen, that's when you need to bring a little bit more energy, whether it comes from the government or whether it comes from the leadership of these societies or from the physicians themselves. I think that these are things that will more and more take place.
I think the problem happens when you start to get into those doctors with a vested interest putting out research and being thought leaders and so forth. Is maybe there should be a barrier between innovators and doctors who are also business people to not being allowed to be the authors of the New England Journal.
But that's not going to be the way to help with the progress of medicine, because those individuals who are the inventors, those who are the people who really have the ideas that can allow for the field to make a substantial step forward, specifically those that you would want to have the opportunity to listen to, because they thought leaders for a reason. They have ideas about how to make progress before everybody else.
Should they be doing the clinical trials, though?
Well, that's a good question. So should they be responsible for exactly what will be happening in a clinical trial? They should not be the people in charge of the clinical trial. But that's already pretty much the way it is. I mean, if you look at, for example, the phase 3 trials, they're very seldom performed by the people who have invented the product, because the people who invent the product very, very frequently don't have the expertise to run, a steering committee or a DSMB committee that looks at safety, etc. And so it's pretty much already the case.
The key is, I think, trying to eliminate and minimize bias also. Mm-hmm. And if somebody does have certain kinds of financial relationships, I think those need to be minimized. Academic-industrial collaborations, I think, can be very successful, but they need to be managed in an appropriate way.
Well, the world changed.
Yeah.
We no longer have these great research universities that just do basic research and then pass it on to the pharmaceuticals, who may then we have health systems, and clinical research is a respected area of research. And as NIH moved closer to funding more clinical research, it also created a much more complex relationship with industry. It is a delicate relationship. Sometimes in our history, the politicians have pushed the universities and said you have to have a closer relationship with industry. We want the pipeline to come out faster. And sometimes they said, pull back now, because this is getting much too complicated. We're worried about bias. We don't have the infrastructure. FDA doesn't have the kind of money it needs to provide, and the Department of Health and Human Services to provide the kind of oversight. So it has to be self-enforcing. And people have said to me, how can we trust you guys to self-enforce? I said, because everything's at stake.